Peacemakers. This is Sara Jamshidi. You are watching Peace Mindedly, a podcast show featuring peaceful bridge makers. First of all, welcome to the program. It's very important for me, for my guest, and for my assistant producer, Mateen, that you are here. We are streaming live in 8 social media channels right now. If you would like to contribute your part for toward peace, I just have one request from you, and that is to kindly share the same program on your feed, so then other people can learn about the peaceful initiative that we are touching in this program for Peace Mindedly. So today I'm talking with Hafsa Lodi, author of Modesty, a Fashion Paradox, uncovering the causes, controversies, and key players behind the global trend to conceal rather than reveal. Hafsa was born in New York. She relocated to the United Arab Emirates with her family when she was 14 years old. Hafsa earned her undergrad degree from Reynolds School of Journalism in Toronto and her master's degree in Islamic law from the University of London. I think she's uniquely qualified to talk about modest fashion because she does practice and wears modestly. Modesty, a fashion paradox, has received many favorable reviews. I think Hafsa is trying to uncover lots of information in the modest fashion industry. She tries to explain almost everything in regard to modest fashion. So I am bringing Hafsa Lodi to my screen. Hello, Hafsa.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me today.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. So, in my personal view, I believe that there is just lots of information that you are trying to unfold and trying to just touch base in such one book. And maybe for the next project, you just need to know and learn more about modest fashion. But for just setting the ground rule running and to just we understand exactly what we are talking about, can you tell us what is modest fashion?
Yes, so typically speaking, modest fashion refers to clothing that covers the shoulders, oftentimes up to the wrists, and covers the knees, oftentimes up to the ankles. It also may or may not include a head covering such as a hijab. Necklines are typically high, and the silhouettes are loose and unfitted without see-through fabric. So that's kind of typically speaking, generally what modest fashion refers to. But of
Mhm.
course, every woman has her own kind of interpretation and her own definition of what modesty means.
Yes. So by reading the book and just diving into the information that you are trying to unfold, is it so it looks perhaps correct me if I'm wrong, but perhaps fashion is for probably well-to-do people who are just trying to cover the best, I mean just dress the best way they can. So but is it really for well-to-do people, or is it for all people of all budget, or
Mhm.
um, um, everyday people? Or yeah, I just want you
Yeah.
to explain me what's
No, I
your
think
intake.
I think fashion definitely holds a place in all across all walks of life, people of all walks of life. Whether or not they're wearing designer clothing obviously depends on their budget and their social circles and their standing in the world. But I think fashion itself, whether whatever kind of pay grade you're at, holds quite a bit of meaning. You dress according to what your personality is and how you want your identity to come across. You dress according to your cultural beliefs. Sometimes you dress according to your religious beliefs, your family rules in some cases. So I definitely think fashion is not just for the elite. Designer fashion and the kind of trend-based fashion that we are kind of fed by luxury fashion houses at mainstream fashion weeks across London, Milan, Paris, and New York, then that is definitely for an elite kind of standing of society.
Excellent. So here is my question, Hafsa. Um, the U.S. media is saturated by explaining perhaps or describing Muslim women as being oppressed, as being submissive, as being, backward, and so forth and so on. Now it's probably for the first time that we see positive story, perhaps circulating in the mainstream, perhaps Western media news cycle. So I want to see what is your take about this new attitude. So of course, as you explain in your book, there has been lots of many people has contributed to this new phenomenon, bloggers and business owners and social media enthusiasts and so forth. But I want you to tell me, what do you think, or how do you feel that the Western media has taken this kind of new approach towards Muslim women?
Yeah, I mean, if you looked at news stories in the mainstream media that described Muslim women a decade ago or right after September 11th, for instance, it was always with images of the burqa, niqab, all black tent-like garments, sometimes blue. I mean, it wasn't much diversity ever when it came to the portrayal of Muslim women in the Western media. It was always linked to politics, linked to the war on terror. There were these kind of unapproachable, foreign-looking images whenever Muslim women were discussed. And I think one of the big positive kind of side effects about the modest fashion movement that has gone global today is that it has really changed how Muslim women are portrayed in the mainstream Western media. And the modest fashion movement is not just a Muslim movement, it's not a religious movement, but it has helped kind of paint this new, modern, colorful, bold picture of what Muslim women can look like. And that's mainly thanks to these Muslim women in the spotlight now, starting with Halima Aden, the Somali hijabi runway model that opened Kanye West runway show back in, I think, 2017. And she kind of paved the path for all of these other young, aspiring hijabi fashion models to follow. And then, of course, all of these modest fashion bloggers that we have on Instagram today, who are Muslim, who are fashionable, and who are kind of proving that you can have the best of both worlds. So I think that's really helped kind of mainstream designers have woken up to the fact that, oh, there's this new Muslim woman who we can cater to, who we can design clothes for. And these new Muslim women are kind of becoming, I mean, they're not new Muslim women. They've been here forever, but they're kind of now being given the spotlight that they rightly deserve.
Okay. So you're right. I have two questions. I'm going to ask the first question. Yes. So one argument that you are making in your book is that probably the mainstream fashion houses are really want to reach out to Muslim pockets and to apply Muslim purchase powers in order to just gain and attract the market towards their own business entity. On the other hand, some of the fashion houses or some of the businesses who are specifically catering towards this particular industry, like Modesty, like some many Modesty just got out of business, but it was which one? The Fashion Valley or
Fashion Valley,
or other businesses, and they try to shy away from anything or having any connotation towards religion, because they also want to apply to a larger audience for the sake of sale. So in one hand, one particular business says, oh, we are all about Muslims and we want, to cater. On the other hand, the Muslim business owners say, you know what, we're for all women or all people. So how do you see this controversy?
So it's interesting. You mentioned the Modest, which unfortunately closed down recently due to the pandemic. But it came, I was speaking to their founder, Ghizlan, and around 30% of their purchases, I believe, were from the Midwest US. They were based in Dubai, in the Middle East, but many American white possibly non-Muslim women were they're a big part of their consumers. So I think it's definitely a smart business approach for these Muslim e-commerce websites, not to kind of target religion or Islamic fashion or a particular definition of modesty, or kind of link it to religion in any way. I think not only to appeal to all religions and people who are perhaps non-religious, but also just because within religion there are such diverse opinions about what modest fashion is. Does it have to have a hijab? Does it have to be muted colors? Does it have to cover the ankle? So I think just by keeping it open, you keep your doors open to everybody. You do have the most, you spread your wings as wide as you can so you can attract all the possible customers who may come your way. And then yes, on the other hand, the luxury designers, none of them really openly admit that we are creating modest fashion to attract these rich Arabs who we see all over social media. None of them are really saying that. We all know it's true. But the fashions they're designing are not just being bought by Muslims. Gucci is making these really cool, trendy, layered looks. And yes, Middle Eastern women are falling for them and buying them, but also European women, American women, Canadian women, people all over the planet in this elite, whoever can afford Gucci, whoever can afford these high fashion labels are buying them. So I would say it's a smart move not to kind of say that we are targeting a specific religion. There are just these population projections and financial projections that have come up over the past few years that have just kind of identified the Muslim millennial market as one with a lot of spending power. So brands are just naturally kind of starting to cater to these modesty guidelines that these Muslim women may have.
How popular, I'm going to go to the other question later, but how popular is modest fashion among Muslim women let's say in Dubai, let's say in the United States, and in the Gulf region, because some of the arguments we cover modest fashion as a part of our business, our news coverage, and we hear constantly people saying that fashion and anything fashions, especially modest fashion, is not one of the areas of focus right now, especially in the Middle East, because there are so many things are going on. We have wars, and we have starvation, we have this, and we have that, and then fashion comes just at the end of the list, our list. So how do you see that?
So I think that's true, given all of the tragedies and the political kind of upheaval that we have in the Middle East often over the past few years, over many years, fashion is not always a priority here. But when you look at these kind of oil-rich Gulf states, Saudi, UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, fashion definitely plays a big role in the lives of women here, in the lives of locals and expats. But modest fashion as a retail category may not be as popular here, surprisingly, as it is in the US and as it is in the UK. Because here, traditionally, there's a lot of segregation in Arab culture. So women often wear the abaya, and underneath that, they may wear whatever they want, possibly immodest clothing, that's not necessarily modest, because they have that outer garment to wear over. So the modest fashion movement that we're seeing, this big boom, is actually more kind of relevant in the US and in the UK, where women need clothing for their kind of public outings, where they might not necessarily want to wear an abaya. It's not part of their culture. It's not part of the norm in the West. So really, it's kind of a different kind of market that modest fashion appeals to, both in the Middle East as opposed to in the West. I found that very interesting as I researched that. Even some of the designers I spoke to who founded their brands in Dubai, they lived here in Dubai with their families, they founded these fashion labels, but then they found that most of their sales were actually coming from the US. 70%, 80% of their customers were ordering from the US. So it just made more sense for them to move their businesses there. So they actually moved across the world just because there was more of a demand for modest fashion in the West.
I was just fidgeting because I wanted to ask. I prepared this question for the second part of the interview, but since we are talking about the same subject, I'm just going to ask this question now. So, here is at least my hypothesis, and I want your help to we just probably brainstorm or hash out the idea. My hypothesis is daughters or young women of immigrant families in the United States. Some of those immigrant families are a bit conservative or semi-conservative, and they have some sort of strict rules for their family regulations or whatever is working within their own space, right? And what happened was right after 9/11, we've been seeing, narratives and story after story about this kind of Muslim community is that, Muslim are those, Muslims are this. And then perhaps there is space created for some of these young girls and some of these young women who say, you know what we see in the media or what the media is telling about us, it's not us. It's a different story. And then therefore we are going to tell our own story and shape our own narrative. And what helped was social media, because against media, and they just bypassed the Western traditional media platform to create this new narrative. So I'm just wondering, is it fair to say that after 9/11, some of these immigrant families, got loose of their own regulations to give space to these women, and women use this new breathing space and probably within this democracy to just create this space that we are talking about, modest fashion?
Definitely. I mean, you said it exactly correctly. I completely agree with you. This new wave of Muslim feminism by young millennial Muslims has really emerged as a response to the post 9/11 Islamophobia and there's this clash of civilizations narrative that you always are fed as a immigrant living in the US, or even just a third or, second or third culture generation person living in the US. Your family or your parents may have been born and bred in the US, but your grandparents are from somewhere in the East. That there's, the Western ideals that may conflict with your cultural heritage, and social media has become this kind of medium for these Muslim women to showcase what their identity is as this new kind of hybrid of these different worlds. And I think author Shalina Jan Muhammad does a really great job of explaining this. She wrote a book called Generation M, and she refers to Generation M as this group of millennial Muslims who are kind of showing that you can have both faith and modernity, and they're kind of using this to launch their own businesses that merge kind of Islamic values with maybe a modern lifestyle. And I think these faith-based Muslim fashion labels that we're seeing emerge over the past few years that are modest fashion labels are a big example of Generation M designers, Generation M entrepreneurs. So I think her book is a really good one for anybody interested in this idea of how young Muslims in the West are reconciling their faith and their current culture, their Western culture.
Yes, it's indeed, it's very, very good book. I really recommend that. I'm just going to get the exact title very soon. But here's the catch, Hafsa. The catch is, let's say, I'm from Iran, and then in Iran and Saudi Arabia, hijab is mandatory.
Yeah.
And then a young woman in Iran says, what the heck? You're talking about fashion and about modest fashion, something that I do not choose because it's been imposed on me, against me. And they very much dislike your book. So what is I know that you try to be objective, you are not taking sides. I know all of this, but what is your response to that?
Definitely, there are areas, not only countries like Iran and Saudi, but there are also families in every part of the world, in America, in Canada, in the UAE, in the UK. There are families and these pockets of cultural communities where there are these patriarchal families, and the father dictates what the women in his family wear, what they do, what they say, who they marry, what they eat, what time they sleep, when they have to come home, and they have modest fashion imposed on them often as well. I mean, it's a very unfortunate kind of reality of our life. But this book that I wrote, Modesty: A Fashion Paradox, is not about those communities and those examples. I try to focus this book on the modest fashion movement that's really inspiring women to make their own choice to cover up, whether that's for religious, political, cultural, or other reasons. So yeah, I would say that that definitely is a reality of life, and it's very unfortunate. And there's some NGOs and there's feminist organizations trying to help these women. But at the same time, women who have dressed modestly, who choose to dress modestly, have been ostracized from mainstream society because of their choices to dress modestly and to identify with modest fashion. And people kind of often can't believe that they would choose to cover up. And they've had to kind of fight these Western values, these of individualism and of kind of these societal standards that kind of pressure you to bare your skin in order to look attractive. They've kind of really had to fight against those all their life. So this book was more about these kind of women who are finally having a spotlight, a positive spotlight on their choices to dress modestly.
Yes, speaking of which, I really need to mention my editor and assistant producer, Mateen, covers, and she's modern, she's educated, she's a PhD, and she's all of those, and she chooses to cover, and that's exactly the point that you are making for the book. But if you want to be frank about the points that you've been mentioning in the book, what is your critique about your own book?
My critique about my book. Um, one critique, so this book came out right when the whole Black Lives movement was, being like unearthed in the US and kind of spread across the world. And I'm a journalist full time. This book was my only book so far. So I spend my time freelancing for a bunch of publications, and I write about modest fashion often. And one story that kind of came to me in June, July was a story about how Black women are kind of at the forefront of the modest fashion movement, how there's so many very talented Black Muslim fashion designers, models, entrepreneurs in the industry, yet that when you think of modest fashion, when you see the campaigns, when you see the lookbooks that the designers are using, they're often white, and often in this Middle Eastern region, they're often very light-skinned, white Arab passing models that are being used. So this is something that I woke up to over the summer, that, oh, there's a big diversity problem in the modest fashion movement. The modest fashion movement is supposed to celebrate diversity, but there's still a big diversity problem within the movement when it comes to skin tone and when it comes to inclusivity. So I think if I had to critique my book, that's one point, that there's a big diversity angle that I can further explore if we come to a second edition, inshallah. We
Inshallah.
have a half Black model on the cover, Maria Idrisi. She's Moroccan, Pakistani, living in the UK. But I think there's really more space to explore the fabulous Black Muslim women who have really been contributing to this movement for years.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So stay put, Hafsa. I'm going to come back. You are watching To Peace Mindedly, a podcast show featuring peaceful bridge makers. So we are live streaming our conversation on 8 social media channels. We are live streaming through a third party, and we're using a professional studio set, online studio setting. So we do not have an access to our Facebook page to see who they are here and who are those people. So if you just say hi here or on the chat box, we can see you. And if you would like, we can mention you here during our program. So the deal with this program is what they call it YGWYS. So the acronym I try to remember, and that is you get what you see. This is a raw, unedited live program about whoever we are featuring in this show. But what happens is when everything is done, I edit the audio portion of the interview, and I just make it very pleasant for the ears, and we post it on many different podcast channels. They include Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, and many channels. So you can find Peace Mindedly on many podcast channels and whoever you get your listening pleasures. So this is our 21st program on Peace Mindedly. We are on our second season for the podcast show. We are coming back every Tuesday. Mateen and I come back every Tuesday at 12 noon to talk about peace, kindness, compassion, and to feature our peaceful bridge makers, the people who are bridging gaps between cultures, between nations, between attitudes, and they are just offering their body of work to bridge the gap. For next week, I am talking with Elizabeth Lesser, author of many best-selling books, including her recent book, Cassandra Speaks. When women are storytellers, the human story changes. Elizabeth is the co-founder of Omega Institute, nonprofit mission-driven organization on wellness, spirituality, and creativity. After that, on September 22nd, this is interesting. September 22nd, I'm talking with Nancy Wilson, author of Growing Roses, the Beginner's Handbook. The reason I'm talking with Nancy, because it happened September 22nd is the National Rose Day. And I love roses. I grow roses in my garden, and featuring Nancy is very narcissistic because I really want to learn more about roses. So therefore, we are going to talk about roses, and I believe that flowers are a direct creatures of God on this planet to show us beauty, and especially roses. So on September 22, we are talking with Nancy Wilson about how to grow roses. After that, on September 29, we are talking with Massimo Pagliucci. He will tell us about a field guide to a happy life. 53 brief lessons for living. Massimo is a professor of philosophy at the City College of New York, and he will tell us how ancient philosophers like Plato, like Aristotle, and many others kept themselves amused, entertained, and exuberant with life, and what we can learn from those philosophers today. I think is this book especially practical for our use these days because of the uncertainty that we are swimming within. For this hour, and then I wanted to mention you the book that Hafsa, our guest, mentioned by Shelina Jan Mohammed. Generation M, Young Muslims Changing the World. Generation M. It's the new phrase that I've been seeing young, exuberant, modern, cosmopolitan girls and women are using as a form of empowerment. So it's a very good read. It's a good read. For this hour, although, we are talking with Hafsa Lodi, American journalist based in Dubai. Hafsa is the author of Modesty, a fashion paradox. Modesty, a fashion paradox, uncovering the causes, controversies, and key players behind a global trend to conceal rather than reveal. Hafsa's book is available on goldtune.com. We have affiliation program with Amazon, and if you purchase the book through goldtune.com, you are going to help our Peace Journalism Initiative. Hafsa studied journalism and Islamic law, and she practices modest fashion herself. Her relationship with religion, culture, and modernity has always been very tight. She writes about the same topic for the national newspaper, luxury magazine, Mojay magazine, and other publications. She started the book when she was, what's that? She was having a creator in her tummy, and then she dedicated the book to Nura Safiya, her daughter. How old is your daughter, Hafsa?
Oh, she's almost 2. She's 21 months now.
Oh, mashallah, today is my daughter's birthday.
Oh, happy birthday.
Yes, yes, thank you. And then she turned 10. And
Oh,
here's the
wow.
thing, Hafsa. Here's the thing. Anytime that I hear people say, "Oh, it's gonna go pass by. It's gonna just time. It's gonna fly. It's gonna go so quickly," and I just look at them like, "Yeah, really?" And honestly, I don't think so. Yesterday, one of my friends, Johan Kimberg, she's a rabbi, and she shared a quote on Facebook that I really wanted to mention it here in our program for us working mothers. It said, "Why is it that we expect a woman to work like she doesn't have kids, and the same time expect her to raise her kids like she doesn't work?"
That's
Shout
such a good
out.
quote.
Exactly.
Oh,
Shout out to all hardworking moms out there being measured by impossible
seriously.
standards. Honestly, honestly. So, what has been the experience for you as a working mom? And I know that in Dubai, at least, women have some help, or especially if you are around your family members, you have your mom,
Yeah.
your sister. It's very different in the United States. We just do
Yeah, of
everything
course.
ourselves.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, working mom. So how has been the experience for you?
It's been, so I haven't gone back to office full time since having a baby, and I live close by to my mother, so that helps. I personally don't have a nanny or a helper like that. I haven't given into that little part of Dubai life just yet. I was raised in the States and I never had a nanny, so it's not something that I'm really used to in my own family or culture. But it's definitely tough. You definitely have to time manage, and nighttime is the only time you can work. Basically, after they go to sleep, that's the only time you're going to be productive. The day is just running around and entertaining her and making her food, trying to feed her, cleaning up her food. That's basically all day.
I know. Martin is also working mom, so we know what you're talking about. So in your book, you write about bloggers, designers, business owners, photographers, and all of those people, and then somehow it somehow it feels, or there is an affair that I felt. So what we are talking about, concealment, so
Mhm,
what these people are trying to conceal rather than reveal
mhm.
within their workspace.
Yeah, so within, I mean, this is how basically I think one of the main features of modest fashion, how we're seeing it on social media, is that modesty is about concealing your skin and covering your skin. So we see a lot of these designs and these trends on social media that may be skin covering, but may not be typically modest if you look at modesty from a traditional perspective. For instance, I'll give a personal story. There's this hijab trend that's going around social media that I wanted to try myself today. So it's when women wear a button-down white shirt, like kind of like this, but in white, with a like a tank top, kind of like a corset top on top of it. So corsets are typically not really modest fashion clothing, but a kind of a hallmark of the modest fashion movement is that women are taking these items and layering them to make an overall modest look. So I tried doing that this morning after seeing it on Instagram everywhere. And I looked in the mirror and I didn't feel modest at all. I felt like I'm accentuating a part of my body that I don't want to. I felt that was kind of counteractive to the whole modesty ideal. So it's really interesting. That's one of it's kind of one of the conflicts and the paradoxes of the modest fashion movement. Is fashion modest just if it covers your skin? If it's still skin tight, is it modest? If it's still kind of drawing attention to particular areas of a woman's body that maybe traditionally aren't supposed to be accentuated, is it still modest? So this is one of the kind of contradictions of the movement that I found, and I kind of experienced myself today for the first time.
Thanks for sharing. Yes, yes, exactly. So probably is it fair to say that it's really personal interpretation?
Definitely. Definitely. And I feel like it also depends on your body type, perhaps. And when I see all these pictures of these hijabi women on Instagram, these modest fashion bloggers using layering in this really smart, clever way, I still think they look modest. Oftentimes, they still look modest. On me, for some reason, it didn't look modest, but maybe it's just a personal thing as well. But definitely, modesty is not only personal; it often changes. Your personal definition of modesty changes throughout your life. Mine has personally, from whether it's from wearing short sleeves to long sleeves to covering elbows to wearing burkinis one day and then wearing normal one-piece swimsuits the other. Like it really, I think life circumstances kind of shape how you view fashion, how you view modesty, and how you kind of view the merging of both as well.
So tell me, why it changed for you? What happened? Why you decided?
It's a good question. I think I wouldn't say anything big, really. I think throughout researching this book, my definition of modest fashion also changed. I think if you even just look at the hijab, we all have like this mainstream view of the hijab that, hijab means that only the face, hands, and feet can be shown. But if you see all of these modest fashion bloggers on Instagram, they all have very varying approaches to modesty. And there's this term called haram ankles that they kind of joke about, that, oh, if they're wearing a midi skirt that maybe covers their calves but not their ankles, they'll get all these comments on Instagram from all these modest fashion police, or they call the haram police, who say, this isn't hijab, your ankles are showing, or your neck is showing because you're wearing a turban hijab. And I think just seeing all this negativity and seeing all this, these kind of criticisms, even when these women are covering and they're looking stylish and modest, they're looking very modest, but because a flash of ankle, because a neck, because ears are showing, they get all of this criticism. And it made me kind of maybe realize that it's not always about the inches that are on display. Modesty is not just about, if a little bit of skin is showing here and there. It's very much about kind of the intention and how you portray yourself and how you are. Modesty is also an inner virtue, and how you display that, how you embody that, and how your character kind of comes across through your clothing. So yeah, I think there are many different ways for modesty to be expressed, and clothing is only one of them.
Yes, very well put. So in your book, you write modest fashion bloggers are the ambassadors of Islam. What do you mean?
So I think I posed it as a question: are modest fashion bloggers ambassadors of Islam? Because oftentimes, and we're seeing this recently, that, well, so first of all, when these modest fashion bloggers kind of became this big phenomenon, big movement on social media, they were kind of the poster children for Islam on this vehicle, on this kind of medium of social media. So people who may not have been familiar with Muslim women suddenly had Dina Turkiya or Asia, these big hijabi fashion bloggers, as kind of their example of what a Muslim woman looks like. So these women who are modest fashion bloggers, who wear the hijab, who are visibly Muslim on social media, and hashtag their outfits with modest fashion blogger or Muslim fashion blogger, they never ask to be role models of the religion, but oftentimes we as followers portray that pressure. We kind of put it onto them as followers, as viewers. So I kind of question that. Is this fair? Is this why are modest fashion bloggers kind of the ambassadors of the faith? And some of the women I interviewed said that if you wear the hijab as a woman, you are visibly Muslim. That is a marker of your identity as a Muslim woman. Automatically, you are an ambassador of Islam. You're supposed to be representing what the religion looks like to the world. When you leave your house wearing a hijab, you're supposed to act like an exemplary Muslim woman. But that's a lot of pressure. No, not every hijabi woman, not every practicing Muslim woman, not every woman who wears modest fashion wants that kind of pressure or responsibility. So it's really interesting to see the difference in opinion. Some Muslim fashion designers see that as their duty, and some modest fashion bloggers say, job, that doesn't mean I'm promoting Islam or preaching any sort of religion. It's just part of me. I'm a fashion blogger and I'm here to show my outfits, and the hijab just happens to be part of that. So it's very different to see the difference. There's a really big spectrum of different women, different Muslim women, different hijabi women, how they all kind of see their role and duty in this wider movement.
So do you believe that if we didn't have Instagram, we could have had this kind of rise in modest fashion?
I'm a millennial Muslim woman and an Instagram addict, and I can't imagine a modest fashion movement at this scale without Instagram and TikTok and Facebook, especially Instagram. Honestly, I think we might have seen a runway trend, and yes, there may have been some references to Muslim women, but it's really this idea of this modest fashion blogger, whether or not she wears hijab, whether or not she's Muslim. There's amazing Jewish and Christian inspiring fashion bloggers out there as well on Instagram. And I think together they all really are one of the main reasons why we're seeing this movement today become so big. I mean, it surfaced maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and it's still a huge booming movement. So I think we really have to give Instagram a lot of credit.
Okay, for sure. Instagram, a lot of credit. So is it all about picture? Here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking out loud, and probably I'm thinking with you. For the fashion industry, we need to see, and then after we see, okay, so this is what I want, or just tailoring according to our personal style. But I'm just thinking, yeah, probably we just addressed, but I'm just at the awe to see how picture you're talking about. So these photographers and modest fashion photographers and all of those. Here's my question. I was just lost for a second. So we are right now. I mean, thanks to some of these organizations, Modernista, Think Fashion, and all of this, we have catwalks. And we have women who are, designers, modest fashion designers, who are exactly applying what is happening in the larger fashion catwalks in Milan, in Rome, in New York, and other places. And then they have their own segment of modest fashion. And then, since you've covered fashion and fashion industry, is there any distinct differences between what we are seeing? Of course, the look is one thing, but the way they operate or the way they go about. Because I've seen in some of those. In fact, I was in Dubai, and probably I just missed you for the catwalk that Özlem and Franco was doing, but.
Yes.
But I mean, I know that they are charging less, or they are more about community and so forth. But I want to see what is your take about the distinct differences between the mainstream fashion catwalks and modest fashion catwalks.
I think with modest fashion catwalks, you have your targeted consumer base there. The audience at Modest Fashion Weeks are women who dress modestly. There aren't extra people who don't kind of follow this lifestyle. So I think that's one major difference. Yes, they charge less, but they also kind of have they get a lot in return. I know Özlem and Franca offer a lot in terms of press coverage, and they have their so Modest Fashion Weeks, the original founder of the original, I think, Modest Fashion Weeks. They also have a e-commerce platform. I think it's called Modest Catwalk or modestfashioncatwalk.com, where they kind of support the designers that work with them. They also have another thing at these modest fashion catwalks that aren't at mainstream fashion weeks are these. They have their kiosks or their little booths set around the event where consumers can go directly speak to the designers, see the clothing firsthand, maybe even buy it right then and there. So I think that is all. That all makes a difference. Also, they have. I know in mainstream fashion, you have obviously the chance to cast your own models, but oftentimes these modest fashion brands will be very picky and choosy when it comes to their models. They'll choose maybe only hijabi models, only covering models, only immigrant models to make a certain point to showcase that diversity angle. So it's really interesting to see in that regard.
Excellent. So, where is future? What is future for modest fashion?
Oh, I don't think modest fashion is going to go away anytime soon, because if anything, we've proven that there's this demand, this really strong demand for modest fashion. But at the same time, if we're seeing how these modest fashion bloggers are dressing, a lot of them are showcasing that you don't really need to buy clothing from a brand that labels itself as a modest fashion label. You can buy any clothing. You can buy any. You can wear, I mean, a bralette top on top of a turtleneck and call it modest fashion. So a lot of these women are being very creative with how they kind of dress to the term modest fashion, how they kind of see modesty as part of their wardrobes. And a lot of them say that they never shop from dedicated modest wear platforms or stores. They shop at H&M, Zara, New Look, Stradivarius, The Gap. They shop at all of these normal stores that are the mainstream stores to shop at. So I think the future might we might see kind of a phasing out of the buzzword modesty and modest fashion. It might just become more integrated into the fashion offerings in these mainstream stores that we see. But that being said, it's been 5-6 years, and modesty is still a buzzword and it's still trending. So it may keep its stay on this pedestal that it's on. But whether or not the word is there, the clothes will definitely reflect the demand for modesty.
Yeah, one of the critiques I have for using the modest fashion industry as reaching out to the customers is aims towards the modest fashion houses. So the big fashion houses, I really want them to use modest fashion designers, Muslim designers. In your book, you talk about Christian Orthodox modest fashion designers, Jewish Orthodox modest fashion designers. But not only those, but also Muslim modest fashion designers integrate within their project to reach
Yeah.
out to Muslim customers. I mean, the thing that you included with Hana Tarjima, I
Yes.
really would
Yes.
love to see
Yeah.
more of those, because
Yes.
one of the frustration over by talking with modest fashion designers is that we really do not want to lose the market to
Yeah.
these giant
Yeah.
businesses, and I think that probably millennials need to do their own work and probably homework to just demand these
Yeah.
big fashion houses to
Yeah.
incorporate modest fashion designers.
Yeah, that's one of the main criticisms of Muslim women's portrayals in fashion as well. That you can't just use the picture of Muslim women on your marketing campaigns and your promotional images without actually recruiting them and consulting with them and hiring them. So yeah, definitely we should see a lot more
What should
collaboration.
they
Like,
do, you think? Well, I mean, let's say I'm Gucci
yeah,
and I'm having a new collection. So, what
yeah.
do you think, you as a writer and
Hmm.
researcher, what do I need to do to reach
So
out to the Muslim?
I think the easiest thing that these big brands can do, which many are actually doing, is to just have Muslim kind of style edits featuring these Muslim modest fashion influencers for various regions. So you just hire one of these, not hire, you collaborate, you work together with one of these stylists or bloggers, and they will kind of style the collection in their own way to showcase a modest look. And I know Burberry and Fendi and Gucci, they do this, and but yeah, that's
But
only
they are not
surface.
using
Yeah,
modest
that's
fashion
only surface.
designers. you
Yeah,
know,
modest fashion
yeah,
designers. Yeah.
modest fashion designers. One of my critiques is really, and from the modest fashion designers themselves. I mean,
Yeah.
some of them are very serious. They are up and running. They have all everything that
Yeah.
business needs to just move forward with their
Yeah. I
business
think,
entity. But
yeah, I think we're more likely to see on that front, maybe in the fast fashion retailers like H&M and Zara. I think there's more maybe room for opportunity there with hiring Muslim modest fashion designers. It's very hard to get into that Italian prim and proper hoity-toity fashion world. Like, so I think definitely retailers like H&M and just fast fashion retailers who already have this kind of appetite for modest fashion, who have recognized that there's this need. They're also already in tune with these needs for sustainability and diversity and inclusivity. So I think it'll definitely be easier to go that route through these
and
more mass market brands.
exactly. And one thing that I really recommend from my own point of view is for the buyers, just demand. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
millennials or buyers demand
Yeah.
of seeing a corporation. So then they happily buy and reach out, and they can just, the fashion houses can sell
Yeah.
their clothes. Stay put, please. Okay. So you are watching To Peace Mindedly, a podcast show featuring peaceful bridge makers. For this hour, we are talking with Hafsa Lodi, American journalist based in Dubai and the author of Modesty, a Fashion Paradox. You can find Hafsa's book on goltun.com. We have the affiliate program with Amazon Books. If you buy the book through our website, we get the small promotion, but still help us with our peace journalism. And at the end of the program, I ask my guests to close the program by sharing something meaningful about peace, about compassion, kindness, and whatever they want to share, statement, prayers, or something that they really want us to know. So here is Hafsa. Okay, yes, go ahead, Hafsa.
Yes, just one message I'd like to. I mean, that's really shown how important it is to me throughout researching this book and writing this book, and focusing so much on the fashion aspect and the outer kind of portrayal of modesty. Is that as women, we are so quick to judge one another on what we're wearing and fashion and how somebody looks, and we're so quick to judge a book by its cover, especially when it comes to modest fashion. And I think it's so important for us to kind of have that insight and that maturity to not do that, to not kind of judge other women and measure other women's worth and kind of dismiss or vilify women depending on their choice of clothing, whether that conforms to your own definition of modesty or not. I think it's so important that we, as women, stop judging one another by how they look.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you so much, Hafsa. I have Mateen, my assistant producer, one of the editors for Goldtone. I have Hafsa. Thank you so much.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you so much, Hafsa. It was a great book and a great discussion, really.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, and Khoda Hafiz. Take care. Stay. Bear with me for a second. Out. Khoda